The House will be in order. Pursuant to the order of the House of January 9th, 2023, the Chair will now recognize members from a list submitted by the majority and minority leaders for morning hour debate. The Chair will alternate recognition between the parties with time equally allocated between the parties of each member other than the majority and minority leaders and minority whip limited to 5 minutes. But in no event shall debate continue beyond 1:50 p.m. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Joyce, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since the Wright brothers first took flight in 1903, exploration, commerce, and transportation have relied on the ability to fly. For decades, regional airports have been the sole provider of flights in and out of rural communities, and it is crucial that we protect the essential air service program for years to come. It is time to invest in our next generation of pilots, ensuring that students from across the country are properly trained and equipped to fly the passengers and the cargoes that our economy needs. In the past 2.5 years, we've seen the consequences of failed aviation policy from the Biden administration, leading to record number of delays and cancellations for travelers across our country. These delays are the result of the Department of Transportation that has failed to put in place systems that support our airlines and our airports. The Securing Growth and Robust Leadership in American Innovation Act will provide the reforms necessary to support air travelers and ensure that the DOT addresses their fault in preventing on-time arrivals. This legislation is the next step in our commitment to creating an economy that is strong. It will enhance our infrastructure, it will uphold our safety standards, promote innovation, and support the 850 million passengers who fly each year. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, this weekend, the Newburgh Volunteer Fire Department celebrated 100 years of service in Blair County, Pennsylvania. We owe a debt of gratitude to the selfless volunteers who have dedicated their time and resources to protecting our community. Their willingness to leave home at the sound of a bell and rush towards those in need shows an incredible commitment to the residents of Blair County. For decades, the fire station has been more than a place to house trucks or to conduct training. It has been a place for the community to gather and to come together to celebrate special occasions. Under the leadership of Chief Mike Ziegler, Newburgh Volunteer Fire Department has strived to reach a standard of excellence. Further, the department has worked tirelessly to recruit multiple new members, training students who will continue to work and serve in Blair County. As these firefighters continue their education, it is essential that Congress provides our volunteer departments with the tools and the training that they so desperately need. On behalf of the entire 13th Congressional District, I congratulate the Newburgh Volunteer Fire Department on reaching this milestone and thank them for their continued service. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield.
The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Rose, for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, this week, House Republicans are committed to fulfilling our commitment to America to end President Biden's border crisis and restore a nation that is safe. Last month, the Republican-led U.S. House of Representatives passed a resolution condemning the use of public schools to house illegal immigrants. Now, this week, we plan to pass H.R. 3941, the Schools Not Shelters Act, which prohibits the use of public elementary and secondary schools and institutions of higher education to provide shelter for illegal immigrants. As many children across our country continue to recover from the pandemic-era learning loss, schools should be focused on helping students recover. By housing illegal immigrants on school campuses, children are being put at risk. And elected officials who endorse these plans are sending a clear message to children and their parents that illegal immigrants and President Biden's failure to secure the southern border matter more than their children's education. Now, make no mistake, President Biden's dangerous open border policies are at fault for this dire situation. In the first 100 days, the president took more than 94 executive actions on immigration that immediately signaled to the world that our borders were open for illegal immigration and that they could count on President Biden to hold the door open for them, even if it meant sacrificing the safety and security of our country. Since taking office, there have been over 5.5 million illegal crossings of our southern border, while in addition to that, approximately 1.5 million immigrants have evaded apprehension by our hardworking Customs and Border Patrol agents. This humanitarian crisis has gotten so bad that New York City's Immigration and Customs Enforcement Office is fully booked through October 2032. If President Biden hadn't halted construction of the southern border wall, ended President Trump's successful Remain in Mexico policy, and concluded use of Title 42, I'm sure this historic crisis would not be this disastrous. But just like we've seen with Bidenomics, Biden-gration has completely failed the American people. With that, Madam Speaker, I yield back.
The chair now recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Nickel, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to celebrate and pay tribute to the Grateful Dead. Last night, the Dead & Company closed out their final act in San Francisco. And while this marks the end of an era, it also gives us an opportunity to reflect on the immense impact they've had on generations of fans. Jerry Garcia said it best when he said, "Maybe we're just one of the last adventures in America." And for those of us who are fans who followed the Dead, they truly were an amazing American adventure. For over 5 decades, their unique blend of rock, folk, and improvisation transcended boundaries, inspiring countless artists and enchanting millions of dedicated fans. In a world often divided, the Grateful Dead reminds us that music has the power to bridge divides and bring people together. Their music served as a beacon of hope, an escape, and a testament to the power of artistic expression. Through their music, the Grateful Dead taught us the value of community, compassion, and the beauty of living in the moment. As we celebrate the Grateful Dead, we also pay tribute to the late Jerry Garcia and all the band members who graced the stage with their exceptional talents. Let's also acknowledge the unwavering dedication of the Deadheads, the devoted fans who traveled far and wide to be part of the Grateful Dead experience. Their unwavering support and enthusiasm nurtured a unique bond between the band and its audience, making each concert totally unique. There was never a concert that was the same as the last. As we celebrate Dead & Company's last concert last night, let's remember that their music and spirit continue to live on in the hearts of all those that they touched. Their journey may have reached its final destination, but their melodies resonate across time, reminding us of the enduring power of music to inspire, uplift, and to bring us together. Madam Speaker, I like people who like the Grateful Dead, and whether in the halls of Congress or back home in North Carolina, I'll always be thankful for the memories they gave us, the music they shared, and the profound impact they had on the lives of everyone in this country. Thank you, and I yield back.
The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. LaMalfa, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So I was looking at a local news source here today. The title of the article was "Heat Waves Add Burden to Electric Vehicle Owners." So there is challenges, it turns out, that these heavy, expensive batteries in electric vehicles have a tendency to get damaged by high temperatures. Electric vehicles are extremely complicated and they're expensive. Repairing batteries in them is nearly impossible, and replacing one is very costly. I saw a bit on there's a very expensive brand of pickup out that they were talking about how to repair it in a fender bender. That somebody hit the rear quarter panel on it, and it kind of drove the body work up into the rest of the forward part of the car. Well, it isn't just a matter of repairing that quarter panel. They had to take the vehicle almost entirely apart and made it a $42,000 repair because there's so much complexity with all the electric vehicle technology that drives all the different wheels and has such an extensive wiring system. So we're being told as Americans that we should start driving these vehicles. We should buy them, replace what we have, and drive these vehicles. And we have my home state of California basically forcing the mandate on that, followed closely behind Biden administration, wanting to do certain things they make up a year. Okay, X amount by 2030. Let's say 50% by 2030 and 75% by 2035, and same thing at the federal level, X amount by 2040 and 2050. They just make this stuff up with fancy round numbers. So some of the recommendations in the article about how to deal with your electric vehicles are actually the absurd part of it, is that when for the EV drivers, they should don't park your car in the sun, okay? Charge during cooler times of day. Now, I got to spend the weekend here in D.C. because my plane was canceled going home the other day. So you try and figure out where the cool time of day is in D.C. And when you're going to charge your car. Use air conditioning sparingly. Sure. In places like this, or even where there's more humidity in the south and others, you're going to drive along in this car because it's electric and not use your air conditioner. One of the really good ones was that they wanted you to not charge. They wanted you to keep the charger plugged in while you're using the air conditioner. Okay, what does that even mean in the article? Keep your vehicle charging plugged in while you're using the battery charger. Does that mean, people made fun of this when they first came along, that you would have an extension cord that's 10 miles long so you can keep it charging while you're driving around? I mean, it becomes really absurd after a while. So what is the bottom line here? For certain people, electric vehicles make sense for them. If they have short commutes, if they do a lot of in-town driving, and it'll last for a particular amount of time. The article goes on to state, though, that most of the time you can come home and plug in, and then you don't need to use a fast charger unless you're on a long trip. If you're on an extended trip, then you're going to have to find a means to do that. You can't just go 200 miles and then charge it for 8 hours, but they don't want you to use a fast charger because it's tough on the battery in hot conditions. So your mobility is really what's being affected, what's being taken away here. And there's those in this place, in the regulatory scheme we have in my home state of California or here in D.C., that don't really care that you have mobility. They don't want you to have that mobility. They want you to be tied to what they believe are your walkable neighborhoods and stay in your 15-minute cities. They don't seem to like that. So this all starts with these mandates, taking away the systems, the things that you use normally, use well, use at your choice, and forcing you into something else. So it's whether it's your vehicles, whether it's your gas stove, or your other appliances, your yard maintenance tools, they want to take that out and convert you to a grid that is not actually ready to accept the mass amount of charging that is going to be needed to do this again. California's grid on any hot day is close to going down. They have to start telling people to shut off their manufacturing plants and such so they can keep the grid going. They're tearing down hydroelectric dams in my district right now because they aren't green enough, even though it makes CO2-free power. It's absurd what's going on with the regulatory state, and we need to stop the Biden administration by doing it just by executive action. It needs to run through us, so we're held accountable to you. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Guam, Mr. Moylan, for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to celebrate Guam's Liberation Day. 79 years ago, on July 21st, 1944, following 2.5 years of occupation, the United States service members landed on the southwest part of Guam to liberate over 20,000 Chamorros and Americans from the Imperial Japanese military. On December 8, 1941, the feast of Santa Maria Carmelin, Guam's patron saint, the sounds of bombs dropping and planes flying overhead drowned out our otherwise quiet and isolated island. This day was the start of the occupation in Guam. This period in Guam's history was a treacherous one, but the people of the island persevered and displayed a great sense of resilience, willpower, patriotism, and hope. Guamanians never failed to display these traits today and have been tested time and time again. From war to natural disasters, most recently Super Typhoon Mawar, which ravaged our community in May, Guamanians have always held these traits close to their hearts. These traits are unchangeable and have forged our island's culture of peace, harmony, and inafamalik to make good in the world. They guide our way of life and advance our distinct culture identity that is recognizable around the world. This is known as the Hafaday spirit. And Guamanians are proud to share this with everyone they meet and wherever they go. Liberation Day is an annual island-wide celebration that brings all Guamanians together in celebration of the national and local cultural identity, democracy, and freedom. On this day, we remember those who fought, endured, sacrificed, and gave their lives to protect our island home and nation. This day allows us to remember the sacrifices of people who came before us and thank those who currently fight on the front lines for our freedom, families, and values. Guam has a long history with the armed services and plays a large role in contributing to military strength, providing thousands of soldiers, Marines, sailors, airmen, guardsmen, and Coast Guardsmen. Guam is proud to have the highest number of enlistments per capita across the country. As home to the Joint Regional Marianas, Naval Base Guam, Andersen Air Force Base, and Marine Corps Camp Blas Guam, our island is the tip of the spear in our fight against our enemies in the Indo-Pacific region. Our strategic and unparalleled location, invaluable assets, and most importantly, our service members contribute to the strength and the might of the world's greatest fighting force. The past 79 years have been a momentous period for growth, change, and progress for our island. The people of our island have changed to form an even more diverse melting pot of cultures that honors our differences throughout Asia-Pacific region. Today is a day in which we celebrate the values of people, traditions, and cultures that make Guam and America a great place to live. I am proud to stand here and speak today representing such a diverse and significant part of America. As we commemorate the 79th anniversary of Guam's liberation, we recognize the contributions Guam has and will continue to make for our nation. We are proud to be where America's Day begins and fly the American flag in the middle of the Pacific. So let us also celebrate and recognize this day as a day in which we recommit and redeliver on our promises to fight for freedom and democracy across the nation, Pacific region, and world. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentlelady from Iowa, Ms. Miller Meeks, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to take this time to congratulate the 17U Six-Pack Volleyball Club, a volleyball team from Northeast Iowa, for winning the 2023 USAV Junior National Championship in Chicago last week. The team went a perfect 11-0 as they claimed the National Division title. This team showed unbelievable talent throughout the tournament, showing dedication and overcoming adversity in all aspects of the game. I want to congratulate Coach Grassley and the entire team, especially Emma Stammeyer of Iowa City West High School in Iowa's 1st District. You all made Iowa proud. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize the 75th anniversary of the State of Israel. This week, Congress welcomes Israeli President Isaac Herzog to commemorate this milestone and speak about the special relationship between our two nations. After the horrors of the Holocaust, the Jewish people fled to their homeland and declared Israel a nation. The United States was the first country to recognize Israel a nation. The United States has been paving the way for an everlasting friendship. For the past 75 years, Israel has been a crucial partner and a shining beacon of democracy in the Middle East. With anti-Semitism and anti-Israeli hate at home and abroad rising, it is now more important than ever that the United States stand with Israel. I'm honored to welcome President Herzog to Washington, D.C., and I look forward to continuing our enduring partnership. Mr. Speaker, July is National Parks and Recreation Month. There are many parks in Iowa's 1st Congressional District, 4 national parks, from the Herbert Hoover National Historic Site to the many state parks such as Lake McBride or the Maquoketa Cave State Park. These parks provide opportunities for exercise or relaxation with friends and family. I'm proud to have sponsored the Alexander Loughran Veterans in Parks Act, which unanimously passed the House last Congress. This legislation provides free lifetime access to national parks and federal recreational lands for our honorable veterans, active duty military, and Gold Star families. I encourage all Iowans to explore Iowa's natural beauty and appreciate God's creation this month and every month. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to sponsor the Orally Taken Contraceptive Act of 2023, or OTC, which directs the FDA to issue guidance for drug manufacturers who make prescription oral contraceptives, daily contraceptives, which may be suitable for over-the-counter availability over age 18. As a physician and former director of the Iowa Department of Public Health, I recognize the need for increased and consistent access to oral contraceptives and have prioritized expanding access since I was a state senator. As a pro-life individual, preventing pregnancy is the best way to prevent abortion. Oral contraceptives are not emergency contraceptives and do not terminate existing pregnancies. Furthermore, this is a market-based solution that incentivizes competition, which will, in turn, lead to greater options and affordable prices for women. I encourage all of my colleagues to support this bill. I'd like to take a moment to recognize my brother-in-law, Ralph Martino, on his birthday. Happy birthday, Ralph. Thank you, and I yield back.
Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess until 2 p.m. today.
The House will be in order. The prayer will be offered by Chaplain Kibben.
Would you pray with me? God, our Savior, the hope of all the ends of the earth and of the farthest seas, who formed the mountains by your power, who stilled the roaring of the seas and the roaring of their waves, we pray you would be merciful to us and lay your divine hand on these United States. On this day, when extraordinary heat is overwhelming regions within the Gulf South and desert Southwest, we pray that you would again care for the land and water it. Enrich these areas abundantly. In communities across the Midwest and elsewhere where drought threatens farms and fields, livestock and livelihoods, drench the earth's furrows and level its ridges, soften it with showers and bless its crops. The whole earth is filled with awe at your wonders. Where morning dawns, where evening fades, call forth songs of joy with your grace. Crown this season with your bounty. In hopes of your sure provision, we offer our urgent prayers in your sovereign name. Amen.
Amen. The chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceeding and announces to the House the approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Clause 1, Rule 1, I demand a vote on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal.
The question is on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal. Those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. The journal stands approved. For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I object to the vote on the ground that a quorum is not present and make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed. Now, the Pledge of Allegiance will be led by the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Wilson.
Everyone, including our guests in the gallery, are invited to participate. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The chair will entertain requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
Has unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, each time I meet with officials from the Nashville International Airport, which I have the honor of representing in Congress, topics consistently include workforce shortages and recruitment issues. That is why I rise today in support of H.R. 3935, the Securing Growth and Robust Leadership in American Aviation Act. This legislation will streamline Federal Aviation Administration operations, help grow the aviation workforce, invest in airport infrastructure, and improve the flying experience for millions of Americans. It will improve the passenger experience by making key improvements to the air traffic control system. The aviation industry supports 11 million jobs. This bill aims to ensure it continues to grow and flourish for years to come. It supports programs that will attract more pilots, mechanics, and assembly workers. But it also helps ensure those folks are supported and that FAA rules and regulations aren't getting in the way of innovation, competition, or employee retention. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
So for what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina seek recognition?
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
Without objections, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Last Friday, I was grateful the House passed the 63rd Annual National Defense Authorization Act, led by Chairman Mike Rogers and Speaker Kevin McCarthy. This is legislation that advances national security with peace through strength, supporting service members, veterans, and their families. Congress has a duty to support the armed forces of America as a primary function of the federal government, to provide for the common defense, which we cannot do for ourselves. It provides, in this particular bill, promoting missions of the Savannah River site for nuclear capability and deterrence, advancing the defense research projects at universities across the country, increase of service member pay by 5.2%, support National Guard operations with border deployment. As a 31-year veteran and father of 4 sons who have served overseas in the military, I'm committed to working for the security of our country, its service members, and their families. In conclusion, God bless our troops who successfully protected America for 20 years as the global war on terrorism continues, moving from the Afghanistan safe haven to America with open Biden borders. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I wish to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, after a canceled 7 a.m. flight, not getting standby on the 9:30 flight, I'm back in D.C. this afternoon to encourage support for the Securing Growth and Robust Leadership in American Aviation Act, otherwise known as H.R. 3935. This bill invests in critical airport infrastructure. It encourages innovation, and it improves efficiency through restructuring the FAA. Also want to encourage my colleagues to support my H.R. 1818 amendment, which expands the Qualified Tuition Program, otherwise known as the 529 plan, to include aviation mechanic and commercial pilot courses. This is a long-term solution for the aviation industry. It has 137 co-sponsors and tons of aviation industry and labor group support. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield back.
Thank you. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, this year marks the 75th anniversary of the State of Israel and its recreation after World War II, when many of the countries around the world got together and decided, indeed, there should be a current Jewish state. Now, their Day of Independence, known as Yom Ha'atzmaut, occurred this year on the 25th of April. It moves around in order to not conflict with the Sabbath. So on the day it was Israel was officially declared independence back in 1948, of course the day after they were attacked immediately by 5 surrounding Arab countries. So we see Israel's existence is not an easy one. It's one that requires our alliance, as they are a loyal friend to this country as we are to them. So it's only fitting that this week we'll have the President of Israel. We welcome President Isaac Herzog, who my understanding is actually the first native-born Israeli since the creation of the state. So welcome this week to address here in the House President Isaac Herzog. I yield back.
Thank you. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess, subject to the call of the Chair.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the House will be in order. Pursuant to the Clause 8 of Rule 20, the Chair will postpone further proceedings today on motions to suspend the rules on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The House will resume proceedings on postponed questions at a later time. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to suspend the rules and pass the bill S-111, the Providing Accountability Through Transparency Act.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Senate 111, an act to require each agency, in providing notice of a rulemaking, to include a link to a 100-word plain language summary of the proposed rule.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Van Drew, and the gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler, each will control 20 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and to insert extraneous materials on S-111.
Without objection.
I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of S-111, the Providing Accountability Through Transparency Act of 2023. We've already spent a lot of time in this Congress exposing the problems of the administrative state. Agencies impose rules on the American people that lack popular support and would never get through the House and Senate to become law. One of the major problems is that agencies are less transparent and have much less accountability than we do here in Congress. The Administrative Procedure Act requires agencies to make certain disclosures when they propose those rules. Some of these explanations can be dense and bureaucratic and may not always help Americans quickly grasp what agencies plan to do. This bill is a common-sense approach to increasing agency transparency and accountability. It requires agencies to provide a link to plain language summary of 100 words or less for proposed rules. This requirement is a simple, easy way to help the American people better understand what the rules are that agencies may impose. I urge members to support this bill. It is good, it is strong, it is simple, and it is bipartisan. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New Jersey reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of S-111, the Providing Accountability Through Transparency Act of 2023. This simple but important legislation would require our regulatory agencies to provide a summary in no more than 100 words and in plain language of proposed rules on regulations.gov, thus providing the American public with more transparency and easy understanding of new rules and regulations. The Administrative Procedure Act already requires that the public be informed and have the chance to provide feedback to our agency on the rules that they are contemplating. This bill, though, would bring a new level of transparency to our agency's hard work by giving the public a simple and easy-to-understand summary of possible new rules that might affect them or their business. I also commend this bill's sponsors for requiring that the summary is made available online. Transparency and accessibility must go hand in hand. This legislation has already passed the Senate, and I urge my colleagues to support it and send it to the President for his signature. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New York reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to include in the record a statement by Representative Luetkemeyer from Missouri, the longtime sponsor of this bill in the House.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further speakers, and I'm prepared to close.
The gentleman is recognized. Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
I have no further speakers. I'm prepared to close.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, this is good legislation that would provide transparency to the regulatory process. I urge all members to support it, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New York yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I reiterate my strong support for S-111, the Providing Accountability Through Transparency Act. The rules that agencies impose have real-world consequences. Americans should be easily able to understand what a proposed rule does. Instead, they are often left trying to interpret pages of technical and bureaucratic jargon. This bill is a simple measure that will make Americans' lives easier. I urge members to support this bill, and I yield back.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass Senate 111? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended and the bill is passed. For what purposes does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
Mr. Speaker, I request a recorded vote.
A recorded vote has been requested. Does the gentleman request the yeas and nays?
Yes.
All right. The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number has arisen. The yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 1418 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 80, H.R. 1418, a bill to amend the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act to reauthorize user fee programs relating to new animal drugs and generic new animal drugs.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Bilirakis, and the gentlewoman from Washington, Ms. Schreier, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate it. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous materials in the record on the bill.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 1418, the animal drug, animal generic drug user fee amendments of 2023, sponsored by my good friend, Mr. Pence, and of course, Ms. Schreier on the Democrat side, and they're members of the Energy and Commerce Committee. Our committee has worked hard on this legislation for many months. holding a legislative hearing in March and 2 markups this spring before advancing it out of full committee last month by a vote of 49-0. At each step, our members worked in a bipartisan fashion to consider ways to make improvements to this legislation and keep any controversial policies from getting in the way of passing this bill before its September deadline. Great work. Overall, the ADUFA amendments of 2023 will reauthorize the 2 user fee programs established to support the development and review of animal drugs and generics. These drugs keep our animals healthy, from our household pets to our farms animals, and they ensure that our food supply is safe for humans too. That's how important this bill is. The bill before us also includes provisions to support the review process and getting new drugs to the market faster, and adds new reporting requirements to improve transparency and accountability within the FDA Center for Veterinary Medicine. It also takes steps to support utilizing the conditional approval pathway for animal drugs, which will bring more drugs to the market for small animal populations with unmet clinical needs. These are even more, more program enhancements. There are more program enhancements contained in these agreements, addressing foreign inspections, fiscal responsibility, and the need for more innovation. If this legislation is not signed into law before September 30th, Mr. Speaker, the review and approval of the medicines that farmers and pet owners rely on will dramatically slow down. We can't let that happen. Drug makers will also face regulatory uncertainty in getting their therapies to the market, impacting access to new cures and treatments. They are relying on Congress to do its job, and we will, which is why I strongly urge support of this legislation and encourage my colleagues to vote yes. I reserve the balance of my time, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentlewoman from Washington is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume. I first want to thank Chair Rogers, Ranking Member Pallone, Representative Bilirakis, and of course Representative Pence, who sponsored this bill together with me, for their leadership and hard work on this bipartisan bill. I am a proud sponsor. The Animal Drug User Fee Agreement is important for the safety of both animal and human health. This bill will accelerate the development of new medications for animals with a predictable and streamlined review process. It'll hold the FDA accountable for performance goals that'll improve wait times for inspections and provide regulatory certainty for innovators and pet and animal owners alike. And it will ensure that our nation's food supply is safe by making sure the medicines that are administered to food-producing animals are safe. I just want to underscore that this bill is a win for everyone, but it is especially good for farmers. In my district, farmers, ranchers, and dairymen rely on these FDA-approved medications to keep their livestock healthy. And for them, keeping animals healthy is not just about their affection for and responsibility for these animals. It's critical for food production, food safety, and their very economic survival. Having timely access to affordable, effective medications is a key part of our domestic food chain, and that's really the heart of our rural economies. I am so happy to go to bat for our rural areas and our agricultural community with this legislation. I encourage my colleagues to vote yes on this important bill, as you know, Mr. Speaker, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from Washington reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Pence, who is the sponsor of the bill, along with Ms. Strider. So I yield that time. Thank you.
The gentleman is recognized.
Consume whatever you'd like. Thank you.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Congressman Bilirakis. I'm proud to champion the 5th reauthorization of the Animal Drug User Fee Act, with my colleague, Congresswoman Schreier. Thank you. This important legislation is critical to ensuring safe and effective drugs for our nation's livestock industry and farm animals for the next 5 years. It provides resources for the review of new and energetic animal drugs, accelerates the development of animal therapeutics, and promotes a more predictable and streamlined review process. It's important we hold the FDA accountable to performance goals that will enhance inspection times and provide regulatory certainty for both innovators and pet owners alike. Farmers, ranchers, and rural communities across southern Indiana rely on veterinary medicines and therapeutics produced by animal drug manufacturers. Innovators in the Hoosier State, like Elanco Animal Health, are leading the charge to keep American farm animals safe and healthy. We need innovation in veterinary medicine to secure the best care for our nation's veterinary patients. This legislation would preserve the security of America's food supply by making certain the medications administered to food-producing animals are safe for animal and human health. I urge support for final passage of this legislation, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Florida reserves.
I reserve, yes.
The gentlewoman from Washington is recognized.
I have no speakers. I'm prepared to close.
The gentleman reserves.
I have no further speakers. I just want to tell you that this is a necessary bill, and I appreciate y'all working in a bipartisan fashion. I know you would like to close. Is that correct?
I'm prepared to close, yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
The gentlewoman from Washington is recognized.
Well, I want to thank you for working together on this bipartisan bill. I encourage my colleagues to vote yes on this bill to make sure we can speed novel medications to animals in this country, and I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, this is a great bill. It's a necessary bill for our farmers, but also our animal owners. And I used to be the chair of the Humane Bond Caucus, and we absolutely love our animals. And I appreciate Mr. Pence and Ms. Schreier doing an excellent job on this particular bill, and I urge unanimous passage. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 1418? Those in favor, as amended. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 813 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 813, a bill to direct the Secretary of Commerce, in coordination with the heads of other relevant federal departments and agencies, to conduct interagency review and report to Congress on ways to increase the global competitiveness of the United States in attracting foreign direct investment.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Bilirakis, and the gentlewoman from Washington, Mrs. Schreier, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous materials in the record on this particular bill.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 813, the Global Investment in American Jobs Act of 2023. I want to thank Representative Pence for his work on this legislation, and Representatives Eshoo and Blunt Rochester, and all the co-sponsors of this support, and their support, of course, for this very important piece of legislation. Foreign direct investment, or FDI, has proven to be critical for America's economy, and it is also an integral part of our nation's technological leadership. Still, FDI can be deterred by unnecessary barriers that prohibit its expansion from trusted countries, allies, and friendly economies. Removing these barriers will ensure that the United States remains the global leader in attracting FDI. This legislation will require the Secretary of Commerce, along with heads of other relevant federal departments and agencies, to conduct an interagency review and report to Congress on ways to increase the global competitiveness of the U.S. in attracting FDI from trusted countries. I repeat, trusted countries and economies. This is an important distinction that my friend from Indiana included, and I appreciate this, to ensure we focus on ways to increase FDI from our allies. Again, from our allies, rather than countries like China, Russia, or anyone else who wants to do harm to our great country. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
From Florida reserves, the gentlewoman from Washington is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume. Mr. Speaker, I rise to speak in support of H.R. 813, the Global Investments in American Jobs Act. As this legislation's name would suggest, we should work to encourage foreign direct investment that supports high-quality jobs here in the United States. Foreign direct support and investment from non-adversarial nations can be used to grow critical sectors important for our economic success and our national security, including by creating new jobs in our nation's manufacturing sector. Once the envy of the world, our manufacturing base has faced steady headwinds for the past several decades. Our nation's share of global manufacturing activity declined from 28% in 2002 to just over 17% in 2020. Investment in America's small and medium manufacturers, the bedrock of our industrial might, has also declined over the past 20 years by more than $200 billion. And in that same two-decade period, our domestic manufacturing base has shed more than 4 million jobs. Well, it is time to reverse these trends by revitalizing our nation's manufacturing industry and bringing jobs back home. The work we did last Congress, passing the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the CHIPS and Science Act are already helping to turn the tide. The United States added nearly 700,000 manufacturing jobs during President Biden's first 20 months in office. Total construction spending on manufacturing in the United States has skyrocketed to nearly $200 billion per month, more than doubling pre-pandemic levels. Foreign direct investment can be another part of the solution to revitalize American manufacturing and job creation. Over a third of foreign investments are in domestic manufacturing, exceeding a total of $120 billion a year. This bill will ensure that we keep that flow of investment strong and that such investments support quality, good-paying jobs right here at home. I want to commend Representatives Pence and Eshoo for their leadership on this issue and urge my colleagues to support this legislation. And with that, I will reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from Washington reserves, the gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield 5 minutes or as much time as he wishes to consume to the great gentleman from the great state of Indiana, my good friend, Mr. Pence.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to urge my colleagues to join me in supporting my legislation, H.R. 813, the Global Investment in Americans Jobs Act. This bill seeks to improve the attractiveness of foreign investment from allied nations and identify barriers that are holding back American competitiveness. Over 200,000 Hoosiers are directly employed by international companies, 56 of which are in the manufacturing sector. Because of our long, storied history as a leader in manufacturing, companies across the world have keyed into Indiana. Before companies started outsourcing operations to China and other countries, company towns had lifted small and rural communities across the Hoosier State. Take Cummins Engine Company, for example. I've lived in Columbus, Indiana my entire life, and nearly every family, my own included, has some connection to the company that has helped build and grow Columbus. Beyond Indiana, communities across the country share similar stories where foreign investment has lifted up communities with stable, good-paying jobs. International companies in the U.S. employ 8 million workers and over the past 5 years have created 400,000 new manufacturing jobs. As companies across the world rethink their partnerships with the Chinese Communist Party and other bad actors, we have an opportunity to leverage investments from allied nations. Importantly, this legislation would seek to uncover actions from the CCP to gain access to U.S. markets and circumvent national security laws. For decades, China has built a calculated strategy to corner global supply chains through IP theft and free market manipulation. H.R. 813 addresses anti-competitive practices of the CCP to undermine innovation and gain footholds in next-generation technologies. I'm encouraged that the Global Investment in American Jobs Act has long had broad bipartisan support, like from my colleague from California, Congresswoman Eshoo, and I look forward to working across the aisle to pass this legislation. I urge support for this bill and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentlewoman from Washington is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have no further speakers on this topic. I am prepared to close.
The speakers. Yes, please.
I would just like to summarize by saying that this is an excellent bill. There are so many ways to build up our manufacturing sector and to invest in our workforce. Many of those we've already done through the Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act and the CHIPS and Science Act. This is another way to shore up jobs and manufacturing here at home by encouraging foreign investments from friendly nations. And with that, I'm going to encourage my colleagues to support this bill, encourage a yes vote, and I yield back the remainder of my time.
The gentlewoman from Washington yields back. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I just want to tell you how proud I am to be able to work with these great people here on a very important bill. We need to encourage legitimate foreign investment in our country. I know that other countries create the right environment for us to invest in their countries, and it's really been a great success. We want to continue to do that, but again, we're emphasizing that these have to be legitimate foreign investments from legitimate allied countries. So with that, I commend the sponsors and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 813 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative.
Yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings of this question will be postponed. Go ahead. Pursuant to Clause 12 of Rule 1, the chair declares the House in recess until approximately 6:30 p.m. today.
The House will be in order. Proceedings will resume on questions previously postponed. Votes will be taken in the following order. Motions to suspend the rules and pass Senate 111 and H.R. 813, and the question of agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal if ordered. The first electronic vote will be conducted as a 15-minute vote pursuant to Clause 9 of Rule 20. Remaining electronic votes will be conducted at 5-minute votes. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Van Drew, to suspend the rules and pass Senate 111, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title.
Senate 111, an act to require each agency in providing notice of a rulemaking to include a link to a 100-word plain language summary of the proposed rule.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass Senate 111? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas 400, the nays 0. 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The House will come to order. The House will come to order. The House will come to order. A few more. The House will come to order, please. For what purpose does the gentleman from Louisiana speak?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to speak out of order.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, as we all know, there's a baseball game that's played between the Republicans and Democrats, goes back many decades, raises a lot of money for local charities. In this game, they do keep score, and there's winners and there's losers, and there's a trophy, Mr. Speaker. I would like right now, Mr. Speaker, to yield to the coach, the manager of the Republican team, who happens to be the coach of the winning team, Mr. Williams from Texas.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you. Thank you, Leader, and it's an honor to be up here today, and I want to first of all say, on June 28th of this year, we raised $1.8 million for charity through our baseball game. We had 27,000 people paid to attend. We honored law enforcement, and Toyota was our sponsor. Tonight I stand here with Bill Johnson, one of our captains, and Gary Palmer, and Chuck Fleishman, who we shortly call MVP. Hey! But this game is a tradition in Washington. Both sides play hard. The Democrats played hard this year. We played a little harder. The score was 16-6 in the Republicans' favor. And I just want to say this, Leader, that we truly are America's team, and we're proud of it. We've had a three-peat. Practice starts September 4th of this year as we move to a four-peat. So with that being said, we accept our trophy. We're honored to play our Democratic colleague friends. We'll be looking forward to next year's game. And I just say, may God bless America. Thank you very much.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to now yield to the manager of the Democrat team, Ms. Sanchez of California.
Thank you so much. I want to congratulate my colleagues on another successful congressional baseball game. Sadly, my Democrats were bested this year, but I will tell you this year was a rebuilding year for us, and just look at the level of talent we displayed this year. Congressman DeLuzio and Congressman Aguilar were stellar on the mound. Congressman Panetta displayed some Gold Glove-worthy defense in the outfield, and freshman Congressman Jeff Jackson and Greg Casar showed some major speed on the base paths. And our MVP of the game, Kevin Mullen, had 2 spectacular catches in left field and a hit to boot. That deserves a round of applause. But I have long said, Mr. Speaker, the House is not in order. House is not in order.
The gentlelady will suspend. The House will come to order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But I have long said that the biggest winners in the congressional baseball game are the charities that we raise money for. This year, I'm proud that we raised over $1.8 million for charities like the Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Washington, the Washington Literacy Center, and the United States Capitol Police Memorial Fund. Mr. Speaker, the House is not in order.
The House will come to order, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That is money that will go to things like Little League programs in D.C., language classes for adults learning English, and the families of Capitol Police officers wounded or killed in the line of duty. And those are just a few of the charities that will benefit from the money that we've raised. And that, Mr. Speaker, makes the game worth it. Anyone who knows me knows that my heart is in baseball. I love the game, and I love this event. And I want to thank the Congressional Sports for Charity Group for another successful year, the over 20,000 fans who came out to the game to watch, and to my players, both veterans and newbies alike, for leaving it all on the field. To Coach Williams and his squad, I congratulate you, but I will say this, polish up that trophy because we are coming for you next year. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
Mr. Speaker, with that, let's resume voting. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Bilirakis, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 813, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title.
H.R. 813, a bill to direct the Secretary of Commerce in coordination with the heads of other relevant federal departments and agencies to conduct an interagency review of and report to Congress on ways to increase the global competitiveness of the United States and attracting foreign direct investment.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas were 386, the nays were 22. Two-thirds being affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
Gavel then read. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the question on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal, which the Chair will put de novo. The question is on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it, and the journal stands approved. For what purpose does the gentleman from Wisconsin seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that it be made in order at any time on Wednesday, July 19, 2023, for the Speaker to declare a recess, subject to the call of the Chair, for the purpose of receiving in joint meeting His Excellency Isaac Herzog, President of the State of Israel.
Without objection. For what purpose does the gentleman from Wisconsin seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on House Administration be discharged from further consideration of H.R. 593 and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
The House will be in order. The clerk will report the title of the resolution.
House Resolution 593, resolution authorizing video recording in the House chamber during a joint meeting of the Congress for certain educational purposes.
Is there an objection to the consideration of the resolution? Without objection, the resolution is agreed to, and the motion to consider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Wisconsin seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that it be in order at any time through July 20, 2023, to consider in the House Joint Resolution 79, if called up by the Chair of the Committee on Foreign Affairs or his designee, and that the joint resolution be considered as read, and that the previous question be considered as ordered on the joint resolution to final passage without intervening motion, except 30 minutes equally divided among and controlled by Representative McCall of Texas, Representative Meeks of New York, and Representative Gates of Florida, or their respective designees, and that the provisions of Section 202 of the National Emergencies Act, 50 U.S.C. 16-2022, shall not apply to the joint resolution through July 20, 2023.
Objection so ordered. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arkansas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, by direction of the Committee on Appropriations, I submit a privileged report for filing under the rule.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
This one first. That's GG. Yeah, so that one. Okay. Report to accompany H.R. 4664, a bill making appropriations for financial services and general government for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2024, and for other purposes.
Referred to the Union calendar and ordered printed pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 21. Points of order are reserved. Purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. By direction of the Committee of Appropriations, I submit a privileged report for filing under the rule.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Report to accompany H.R. 4665, a bill making appropriations for the Department of State, Foreign Operations, and related programs for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2024, and for other purposes.
Referred to the Union calendar and order printed pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 21. Points of order are reserved. In order, the members will take their conversations off the floor. The chair will now entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise to call on President Biden to immediately approve the major disaster declaration requested by New York Governor Kathy Hochul. The Hudson Valley was ravaged by storms and flooding on July 8th, with a young woman tragically losing her life. Thanks to the heroic efforts of our first responders, including the Piermont Fire Department's dive team and high-angle rescue team, Carmel Police Department, Putnam County Sheriff's Office, the Yorktown Police Department, among many, many more, thankfully, no other lives were lost. My office has been working in tandem with state and local elected officials to ensure that our region receives the federal aid it needs to get back on its feet, which is why I'm calling on President Biden to immediately approve the major disaster declaration requested by New York State. We need FEMA to help our hard-hit Hudson Valley communities recover in full and provide much-needed resources and aid to impacted homeowners and municipalities alike, with the damage in the tens of millions of dollars. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Consent to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to discuss today how Democrats are putting people over politics and working to support all Americans. We are lowering the everyday cost of living for working families. We have brought inflation down significantly from the pandemic-related heights. We've capped the price of insulin for America's 37 million diabetics, and we continue to fight to lower prices of other life-saving medications. We have created more than 13 million jobs since President Biden took office, and we are fixing the roads and bridges that America uses to travel on throughout the country. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle were against this proposition, and many voted against it. But now I see them at home taking pictures in front of bridges and roads being fixed. Pretty interesting. We've created more than 13 million jobs, as I said. In addition, we're making communities safer. We've passed legislation to protect America's children and expanded background checks to keep dangerous weapons off the streets. And I have said it before, and I will say it again. I am extremely proud that my party works for the American people and not special interests. And with that, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize the passionate team of problem solvers at Common Threads, including its Chief Executive Officer and co-founder, Linda Novick O'Keefe. Common Threads operates across the nation, providing children, educators, caregivers, and healthcare professionals with the resources, curriculum, and training needed to champion healthy cooking and nutrition education. Since its inception, Common Threads has reached more than 550,000 students and 103,000 adults with more than 4.3 million snacks and meals served. Common Threads recognizes nutrition education is a cornerstone to the healthier communities. Their programs give families the tools to make better nutritional choices by focusing on nutrition basics, meal affordability, and healthy substitutions. There's a lot of talk about how food is medicine, but food is also prevention. And with effective and evidence-based nutrition education, we can continue to curb the disastrous instances and impacts of diet-related chronic diseases. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, as the Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer has stated,
Our investigation into the Biden family's business dealings has uncovered a web of complex financial transactions, shell companies, and attempts to conceal payments. It's our duty to determine whether these activities compromise our national security and impact the president's policy decisions. Thanks to the hard work of Chairman Jason Smith and the Ways and Means Committee, IRS whistleblowers have come forward with troubling information. These courageous individuals shed light on the politicization and misconduct within the Department of Justice and the IRS regarding the Hunter Biden investigation. The American people deserve answers. They deserve to know if federal law enforcement was compromised, if Joe Biden has shielded from evidence, and if Hunter Biden was given preferential treatment leading to a sweetheart plea deal he received last month. Transparency and accountability are the foundations of our democracy, and as members of this body, we must deliver on these principles. It is our responsibility to ensure that no one is above the law and that justice is served. I urge all of my colleagues to demand the truth and to stand with the American people. Together, we can restore faith in our institutions and safeguard the integrity of our democracy. And, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Consent to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate tennis star Chris Eubanks on his impressive Wimbledon run. Chris Eubanks is an Atlanta, Georgia native who played tennis at Georgia Tech. During his time at Tech, Eubanks was named the ACC Player of the Year twice and was a two-time All-American. At Wimbledon, Eubanks beat the #1 British player and 2022 Wimbledon semifinalists in the second round in front of a lively crowd. He advanced to the quarterfinals of the tournament after defeating the world #5 player in a more than 3-hour battle. Eubanks is now the 13th man in the Open era to reach the final 8 in his debut at Wimbledon and the first American man to do so since 1984. His performance at Wimbledon propelled him to a world #43 ranking and now guarantees himself entry into every tournament and a seating at the U.S. Open. I would like to take the time to congratulate Mr. Eubanks on his valiant Wimbledon run and wish him the best of luck in his future endeavors. Chris, you have made us in Georgia proud and made your country proud. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Wisconsin seek recognition?
I'd like to ask make unanimous request to speak for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
I'd like one more time to ask the President or people of this body to weigh in with the President and try to come to some sort of conclusion on the war with the Ukraine. It seems to me that there are two groups. People who just want us to pull out and people who want to be all in for years and years. However, the longer this war drags on, the worse relationships, long-term relationships get between Russia and the United States. Russia has a very low birth rate and has had a lot of their young people leave for the United States and other parts of the world recently. Ukraine has the second lowest birth rate in the world. Neither one of these countries can afford to lose any more of their young people at this war. The sooner the war wraps up, the better. I am very disappointed that the press is not asking questions of the Biden administration and that the Biden administration seems completely uninterested in negotiating some settlement of the war. I am aware of the fact the U.S. cannot appear an impartial broker, but we should strongly encourage Turkey or Israel or France to step in and try to negotiate an end with this war. I do not know why it seems like the Biden administration does not want it to end. Thank you.
The gentleman yields. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 9, 2023, the gentleman from California, Mr. Kiley, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker,
it has been nearly 5 months since President Biden nominated Julie Su to be Secretary of Labor. That nomination remains stalled. The Senate has declined to confirm her, and she now faces bipartisan opposition. And yet, the president has not withdrawn her nomination. Worse yet, Su is continuing to serve as Secretary of Labor in an acting capacity, despite the Senate declining to put her in that position. It appears that this is now the plan, to simply cancel the vote and carry on as if she'd been confirmed. Su's leading supporter in the Senate, Bernie Sanders, said as much. He said, "I hope she has the votes to become the secretary. If not, of course, she should stay where she is." "She's doing a great job," Sanders continued. "Why would you not?" Well, why would you not? One simple reason is the Constitution. This is blatantly an end run around the Constitution's advice and consent requirement of Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2. As further evidence of the Biden administration's plan to simply keep Su on indefinitely, with or without a vote, after months of Department of Labor rulemaking being put on pause to spare Su negative press during the confirmation process, the wheels are now back in motion. The administration seems to be acknowledging that Su does not have the votes for confirmation, but again, plans to keep her at the helm of the Labor Department anyway. Now, this administration has a disturbing pattern of seeking to do by undemocratic means that which it cannot do by democratic means. For example, on the topic of student loan forgiveness, President Biden had said, "I don't think I have the authority to do that," and then he went ahead and did it anyway by executive order. On the issue of independent contracting, Congress has declined to adopt the destructive ABC test via the PRO Act, so the Labor Department is seeking to enact a functionally equivalent legal standard by rulemaking. But this here is the most brazen example yet. Having made the worst possible pick for Labor Secretary, which the United States Senate is rightly rejecting, the president is trying to install his nominee as the permanent secretary anyway. Now, the student loan executive order, of course, was just struck down by the Supreme Court. But what the administration is attempting here is much more potentially disruptive. What is at issue is not just one policy. Rather, it is every action the Department of Labor takes under Acting Secretary Su that will be put under a legal cloud. Now, Su's allies have tried to make a legal argument relating to the interplay of the Federal Vacancies Reform Act and the statute that created the position of Deputy Secretary of Labor. This argument is without merit. There is no statutory authority to have an acting secretary who has been nominated for permanent secretary continue serving indefinitely with or without confirmation, nor could there be, because any such statute would violate the Constitution. Education and the Workforce Chair Virginia Fox and I have sent a letter to Gene Dodaro, U.S. Comptroller General at the U.S. Government Accountability Office, requesting an opinion on the legality of keeping Su at the head of labor indefinitely. But none of this should be necessary. The White House and Julie Su have had every opportunity to persuade the Senate. They have had a nightly war room and daily arm twisting for months. It is well past time to withdraw the nomination and for the president to nominate a labor secretary who will be on the side of American workers. Mr. Speaker, last month, the district attorney of Placer County in my district secured the first ever murder conviction in California for dealing fentanyl. This is a very important moment in the battle against the fentanyl epidemic that is taking such a tragic toll on every community across the country. As the New York Times reported, the novel prosecution in Placer, northeast of Sacramento, is being closely watched in law enforcement and legislative circles in California, which lost about 6,000 people to fentanyl and other opioids in 2021, the last year for which complete data is available. Prosecutors have been looking for ways to hold people distributing the drug accountable for the staggering death toll. Now, I'd like to share the details about this case and the successful legal strategy of the district attorney, but first, a word about the scale of the fentanyl crisis in the United States. Fentanyl has become the leading cause of death for Americans ages 18 to 45, surpassing car accidents, surpassing suicides, surpassing everything. It's now the leading cause of death for young people in our country. It's affecting every community, including my own. 73,102 Americans died from fentanyl in the past year. That amounts to 200 deaths every day, 1 every 7 minutes. And the reason is largely because of the lethality of fentanyl, which is unlike any other drug, 100 times more potent than morphine. 2 milligrams, or amount that fits on the tip of a pencil, is a deadly dose. Fentanyl is being added to street pills. 98% of pills sold on the street are fakes, and 60% have the potential to be lethal. Many victims are teenagers, people with no prior drug use, who perhaps were stressed out from isolation during the COVID shutdowns. They purchase what turns out to be fake pills, such as Xanax, over social media or on the internet. Dealers often deliver these pills straight to the victims' homes. Now, a huge part of this problem is to prevent fentanyl from coming into the United States. The southern border is by far the primary source. In fact, in 2022 alone, the DEA seized 379 million lethal doses of fentanyl. Securing the border would diminish the availability, would diminish the ability to traffic into the United States, would save many, many lives, and is the most important part of this equation. But there are other ways that we can tackle the problem. And that's where Placer County is leading the way. Now, like other communities across the country, our county did an astronomical 450% increase in fentanyl deaths from 2019 to 2021. Almost half of those were among residents 25 years of age or younger. And the case that was recently prosecuted involved the tragic death of a 15-year-old Roseville girl who passed away on June 21st, 2022. The dealer was a Placer County area drug dealer named Nathaniel, who was involved in selling fentanyl to minors. He possessed and transported fentanyl in the form of M30 Percocet pills. The fentanyl was pressed into the pill. One of his customers was a 15-year-old girl who overdosed on one of those pills and as a result passed away in June. Nathaniel witnessed this OD, and after his customer died, he continued to sell pills from the same batch to other individuals. This is why he was charged with murder. It's the first murder charge and conviction of a fentanyl dealer in California. Specifically, he was charged by Placer County District Attorney Morgan Geyer and convicted of second-degree murder in Placer County Superior Court. In order to establish his case, District Attorney Geyer had to prove the following elements. First, that Nathaniel did in fact deal the deadly fentanyl pills to his victim. Second, that the defendant knew that the pills he provided to his victim contained fentanyl. And third, that he knew how deadly the fentanyl that he was providing was. In other words, he had to know his actions could lead to the death of the customer and then choose to deal anyway. That is the basic predicate of the murder charges and conviction. Other factors in play in this case involved callousness. District Attorney Geyer indicated that he would only pursue murder charges if a degree of callousness is present. If a dealer continues to deal after he or she knows someone died of the pills and is pursuing profit. He said that charges would be less likely in cases where addicts were simply sharing pills with one another. A second additional factor in play here was deception, where the dealer deceptively markets fentanyl as something else. Geyer said that that changes the legal landscape. Now, in an era of skyrocketing and tragic fentanyl deaths, and the increasing prevalence of it in our communities, a multi-pronged approach of education, accountability, and stopping the supply is needed. But the prevailing prosecutorial approach and many of the criminal laws on the books in California are failing to achieve an adequate level of deterrence. So the strategy that is being pursued in Placer is that by raising the cost of dealing fentanyl to dealers, we're talking about a 15 years to life sentence here for second-degree murder, we can keep these predators away from our communities. Now, I want to also add a quote from District Attorney Geyer, which I think is a very important one. He said, "I have heard the criticism that this is a retread of the war on drugs," but he said it isn't. Fentanyl is something different, and that's something that we really need to get an argument we really need to understand, is that whatever arguments we might make in terms of prosecution strategies when it comes to other forms of drug use, there is simply no comparison to the damage that this drug is doing across our country. And so we must take action in every way possible. And this murder conviction, first of its kind, in Placer County, sends a loud and clear message to those who would victimize young people, who would victimize Americans with this lethal substance. It says, stay out of our community. So I encourage prosecutors across California and across the country to look at the model the District Attorney Geyer has provided in California, because it will save lives. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong support of the 5.2% pay raise for our servicemen and women provided for in the National Defense Authorization Act, or the NDAA. Americans have been left struggling under the weight of runaway inflation and ever-increasing cost of living, perhaps none more so than those who are in uniform. Skyrocketing inflation has contributed to pay for service members falling behind that of their civilian counterparts in terms of purchasing power. The much-needed pay increase that we are providing with this legislation, which is the largest in 22 years, will ensure that compensation for military service is at least commensurate with the rise in civilian wages. In concrete terms, this means more income to cover housing, food, providing for family, and other basic necessities that, frankly, those in uniform serving our country shouldn't have to lose sleep over. In addition to this across-the-board pay increase, the NDAA contains numerous provisions designed to make life more affordable for junior enlistees. Pay for our military's most junior enlistees, E1s, is currently a paltry $22,000 a year. The NDAA increases that base pay rate to $31,000 a year so that the starting wage for junior enlistees isn't lower than that of a fast food cashier in California. The calculation of basic allowance for housing is also improved to provide a more accurate and higher level of aid for housing. And the basic needs allowance, which enables low-income service members to support a family, is expanded as well. Finally, the Secretary of Defense is authorized to provide monthly bonuses to junior enlisted members to mitigate the impacts of inflation. Mr. Speaker, we owe members of our military a debt that can never be repaid for their service and sacrifice to our country. Americans undoubtedly have an obligation to provide a level of compensation that matches at least that of their civilian counterparts and enables service members to meet basic housing costs and provide for their families. This legislation fulfills that basic foundational commitment, and I am proud to support the pay increase for our military. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong support of offering reinstatement to the over 8,000 servicemen and women who were discharged for the military for merely declining to receive a COVID-19 vaccine. As we speak, our nation's military is in the midst of a severe recruitment shortage. The Army fell short of its recruitment goal by 15,000 recruits last year. This year, it's on track to fall short by 20,000. The Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps are facing similar challenges. The consequences of failing to recruit enough volunteers are severe: reduced combat readiness and a reduced ability to keep us safe. This is all the more notable given that our military, of course, is all volunteer. We rely on citizens willingly stepping up and joining to serve our country. These severe shortages have been exacerbated by our Secretary of Defense taking the same approach to COVID as, unfortunately, many civilian leaders did, an approach characterized by heavy-handed overreactions and a complete disregard for scientific evidence and informed policymaking. Members of our armed forces, young, physically fit men and women, are the least at-risk population for COVID. Moreover, over 95% of the military has already been vaccinated against COVID before the discharges occurred. Like students, small business owners, and many other groups of individuals, service members were harmed. They had their lives upended by wholly unnecessary actions pursued by politicians, political leaders who simply were not looking at data and evidence and had no regard for personal freedoms. The National Defense Authorization Act offers a corrective course to these mistakes. The Act provides a pathway to reinstatement for any service member discharged for declining a COVID vaccine and requires the Secretary of Defense to fully inform discharged individuals of the steps they can take. Further, it assures that veterans, for the time spent discharged, will be classified as a career intermission to prevent any negative impact on future promotions, and will also prohibit the Department of Defense from forcing cadets discharged from military service academies to repay tuition. Well, the damage done by the original discharge decisions can never be undone. I am very proud to support legislation that at least allows Congress to do everything in its power to mitigate harm that was done. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of the Providing Accountability Through Transparency Act. What this measure does is very simple. It requires that federal agencies, when issuing a notice of proposed rulemaking, simply include a link to a plain language summary of the proposal in 100 words or less. This is a basic common sense measure to make our government more accessible to Americans. And I think that right now, that is something that is very, very important. After we went through a few years where many people felt like their ability to participate in government was foreclosed altogether, and where we have had a trend now that it's been decades in the making, where more and more power is consolidated in Washington, D.C., and in federal bureaucracies, ordinary citizens have less and less of an opportunity to participate as it is, and then when there is some opportunity, such as a notice of public rulemaking or for public comment, oftentimes they're confronted by a blizzard of legalese that makes it very difficult to make heads or tails of what's even going on. So what this measure does is says 100 words or less, let's put it right there in plain English so everyone is on the same page so that we as a country can have a debate about whether this is good or bad policy. It's a simple step, it's a modest step, but it's a step in the right direction. And for that reason, I am proud to support this measure. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in celebration of Israel's 75th year as a nation. For these last 75 years, Israel has stood as a sanctuary for the Jewish people, as a beacon of freedom, democracy, and human rights in the region, and as a steadfast ally to our nation. The United States has been among Israel's closest allies from its very inception. In fact, President Harry Truman officially recognized Israel merely 11 minutes after its formation. Since that moment, the bond between our two nations, one based upon shared values, common interests, and a united vision for the future, has only grown stronger. Our nation's welcoming of Israeli President Isaac Herzog to speak before a joint session of Congress this Wednesday is just the latest reflection of this special relationship. And I look forward to continuing to advance this partnership in every way I can in Congress. I would also like to take a moment to remark upon the unique place Israel holds, not only in the heart of its citizens, but in people across the globe. In 2018, I had the chance to visit as part of a bipartisan delegation and spent a week meeting with leaders from business, academia, government, the media, the IDF, and other facets of Israeli society, while visiting the West Bank, a kibbutz outside of Gaza, the Holocaust Memorial, a hospital caring for the wounded from Syria, the Lebanon border, and much more. I came away with a sense of deep admiration for the tremendous dynamism and diversity of Israeli society, for the way such a deep connection to history coexists with a drive towards innovation and modernization, for the spirit of self-reliance and national service, for the deeply felt sense of Israeli identity and pride in the nation's achievements. The United States and the global community is enriched by the presence of Israel on the world stage. As a member of Congress, I take great pride in supporting Israel and wherever possible, advocating for Israel in the global arena. Today, I am honored to recognize and commemorate that by celebrating Israel's 75th anniversary as a nation. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to celebrate an exceptional small business in my district, Rockland Donuts and Cinnamon, for their recent recognition on Yelp as the top donut shop in the nation. Let me say that again, the top donut shop in the nation. This distinguished family-owned establishment is operated by Kai and Anna Pho, a couple whose story embodies the American dream. Over 40 years ago, Kai and Anna emigrated from Cambodia to the United States of America. After overcoming the many obstacles they faced in emigrating to a new country, they committed themselves to this enterprise and are now recipients of a well-deserved award for their diligent efforts. Their commitment to their business and strong work ethic is truly inspiring. They rise every morning between 2 and 3 a.m. to prepare fresh donuts for the many patrons who frequent their shop. They serve a wide array of delicious treats, ranging from an assortment of donuts to breakfast croissants, and of course, the traditional cinnamon roll. It was not long ago when they opened their doors, just in May of 2022, and they quickly rose to high regard in our community, earning that 5-star Yelp rating and national attention in this short period of time. I've gone by there a few times recently, and I will tell you, the line is out the door. Therefore, on behalf of California's 3rd Congressional District, and the United States House of Representatives, I am pleased to recognize Rockland Donuts and Cinnamon for this outstanding achievement. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to commemorate the silver anniversary of the Downieville Classic, a world-renowned annual bike race staged in Downieville, California. Before becoming a cherished destination for mountain bike riders, this historic Gold Rush town in the Sierra Nevada was known mainly for its past notoriety of vigilante justice, claim jumping, and boom and bust fortunes. Downieville's famous or inglorious days, such as they were in the past until a pioneer of backcountry mountain biking named Greg Williams realized that the true treasure of the Sierra Nevada was not the gold in the rivers, but in the recreational challenges of the mountains themselves. Greg's vision was to combine world-class ultra biking with spectacular mountain landscapes to revitalize the economy of his hometown. Letting the mountains dictate the course, Greg and his team designed the premier classic point-to-point route as a 26.5-mile Black Diamond lung-busting endurance run from Sierra City to Downieville. Riders climbed to the 74,469-foot crest of the Sierra Nevada, then plunged 5,700 vertical feet along a route of flowing turns, rolling jumps, boulder staircases, and river crossings. This ordeal on wheels tests both the sturdiness of riders and their bikes. Recognizing the challenge of the race and beauty of the course, Outside Magazine named the Downieville Classic one of the 10 best bike races in North America. The combination of sustainable recreation, job creation, and world-famous athletic events has made Downieville a model of economic recovery of struggling mountain communities throughout the Lost Sierra. On behalf of the United States House of Representatives, I am honored to commemorate the 25-year anniversary of the Downieville Classic in recognition of the profound impact the race has had on Sierra County and the broader region. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 9th, 2023, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Jackson, is recognized for 60 minutes as a designee of the Minority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include any extraneous material on the subject of this special order.
Without objection.
It is my honor and a privilege to share the podium today with my esteemed colleague, Sheila Sherfilis McCormick. As we embark on this significant CBC Special Order Hour, in the hour that's come, we're going to dive deep into understanding how terms like colored people have shaped our racial conversation and histories. This isn't just an exploration of the past. It is about how we forge our future. We'll be tackling the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Mr. Speaker, across every field and sector, we are seeing a retreat on this promise. And we're going to stress why it's so vital that our education system is inclusive, recognizing and celebrating our racial diversity rather than suppressing it. We see a future where understanding our collective past enables us to shape a more equitable society. Remember this, conversation isn't just about us or Congress. It is a conversation for every single American, because together we can make a difference. Mr. Speaker, I yield to the distinguished gentleman from the great state of New Jersey, Mr. Donald Payne, Congressman Donald Payne, Jr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And let me thank the gentleman from Illinois for the opportunity to discuss this term that was used in this very chamber just last week. Colored people was a term used to describe African Americans during a debate that was negative. Colored people, a term that hadn't heard in quite some time. Colored people are what the signs above water fountains, outside of bathrooms, in train stations, in bus stations, a part of life that African Americans had to deal with to show the separation, the inequality, the second-class citizenship that we were relegated to for so long. Was it a mistake? I'm sure the gentleman from Arizona feels it was now. But sometimes the truth comes out. And it was during a discussion on diversity in the military and how we don't want to spend, or the loyal opposition doesn't want to spend military dollars on diversity and inclusion. Let's separate the armed forces again. Whites over there, colored people over there. Let's go back. Let's make America great again. That's what that's all about. Going back to someone's good old days, when they were comfortable, when they felt they were supreme, when they thought that they had the upper hand. We don't want equality. We want to go back to the good old days. Let's make America great again. We don't want diversity in the military. That's not for the military to decide. Let's go back. The insult. And I was here, Mr. Speaker. I was on the floor when the gentleman was discussing this. And I rise today to discuss the derogatory term, colored people, and support the need for diversity in programs nationwide. Last week, the MAGA House Republicans from Arizona used the term colored people to describe African Americans and other minorities. He used the term very comfortably, although I think it slipped out. He used it when he discussed his amendment to reject diversity initiatives in the military. And he said his amendment would prohibit discrimination in the armed forces. Clearly, he needs to enroll in one of the diversity courses that he wants to ban. Discrimination has a long history in our country, including hiring in the armed forces. His amendment rejects the success of diversity hiring initiatives in the military, and it could return our country to a time when race was the only factor in who got hired and who got promoted in the military. But let me return to his use of the term colored people. Historically, the term colored has always been used to separate the races into two classes and justify the discrimination that would follow such a separation. It made it legal to have that discussion. It made people comfortable because someone has to be on the top, someone has to be on the bottom in this country. And we've been used against each other for years. The ruling class, the rich, have always pointed people on the bottom at each other so they fight for the crumbs while they stay aloof and get the riches. Colored was also to describe African Americans, and it has its roots in slavery. Laws and official documents define slaves as Negroes, mulattoes, and other colored people. After slavery, Southern states enacted the Jim Crow era of segregation to deny African Americans their rights. Stores and institutions use the term colored to identify bathrooms, water fountains, and other facilities, as I stated. And these facilities were always inferior and usually unsafe. But the Arizona Republican and his colleagues do not want to talk about the past, this past. They want to live in a fantasy where such discrimination never happened. It didn't exist, but it did happen. And discrimination like it is still happening to me, my colleagues in the Congressional Black Caucus, and millions of African Americans nationwide. Even the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives is not safe from it. This is why diversity programs are so vital to our national interest. And Mr. Speaker, I can continue on, and my colleague, Bill Illinois, I could go on forever, but I know there are other members that would like to express their outrage on this issue. We cannot go back. We're not going back. And to people who live in that space, just know you need to be very careful because that is a slippery slope. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I'll yield back.
I would thank the Honorable Donald Payne Jr. for his remarks from the great state of New Jersey. It is now my privilege to yield to the Honorable Chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus, Chairman Stephen Horsford from the great state of Nevada.
I want to thank the gentleman for yielding, Congressman Jonathan Jackson, and to commend you and Congresswoman Sheila Sherfilis McCormick for co-chairing tonight's special order hour. I rise today with my colleagues of the Congressional Black Caucus to address the recent comments made on the House floor by Representative Eli Crane of Arizona during last week's debate on the National Defense Authorization Act. While offering an amendment that would prohibit the Pentagon from participating in race-based concepts in hiring, promotion, or retention in our military, Representative Crane stated that the military was never intended to be, quote, inclusive, unquote, adding that the military strength is, quote, not in its diversity, unquote. Representative Crane would go on to refer to black servicemen and servicewomen who defend our country with their lives as, quote, colored people, unquote. These words hearken back to a dark and racist time in our country's history and should not be tolerated. Representative Crane's comment on the House floor was unprofessional, wholly inappropriate, and unbecoming of a member of the U.S. House of Representatives. Furthermore, to have a word like that spoken anywhere but here on the House floor in the year 2023 actually speaks to the very need for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Sadly, in the days since, we have heard from members on the other side of the aisle who have tried to provide cover for Representative Crane. So we need to be absolutely clear here tonight. For a member of this body to use the words, quote, colored people in this chamber in 2023 is unconscionable, and it calls for nothing short of full condemnation. From the Speaker of this body to the leadership on the other side of the aisle, to those who claim to be allies of the Congressional Black Caucus, your silence is deafening. Representative Crane has publicly stated that he misspoke during debate. However, he has yet to formally apologize directly to his colleagues, including our former chair, the previous chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, Representative Joyce Beatty, who was handling debate on the very amendment before this body. Or to the servicemen and servicewomen who deserve far more respect than the indignity of being reduced to a racial slur on the House floor. To our veteran service members who have had to deal with the consequences of segregation in our military, of being referred to colored even on the battlefields while fighting for our freedom and our justice. When Representative Crane said last week while defending his amendment was shocking, but it was not unsurprising, given what the Republicans have shown us every single day on this issue. Right now, in fact, the U.S. Marine Corps is without a confirmed commandant for the first time in over 160 years. Why? All because one senator believes his political agenda is more important than the service members of our military. And that same senator went on to say he thinks that white nationalists aren't racist. Well, what are they then? MAGA Republicans have made it their entire political agenda to fight against, quote, wokeism. Every time they use the word woke, I think they mean black. They want to ban diversity. They want to ban equity and inclusion programs and erase black history from the classrooms. Ironically, what Representative Crane's comments made clear is that the very diversity, equity, and inclusion programs that they fight against are necessary. They're necessary in boardrooms, in our schools, in the halls of Congress, and yes, in our military, which grows more diverse every day. In fact, more than 40% of our service members today are service members from a broad array: African American, Latino, Asian American, Pacific Islanders, who are serving our country and do not deserve to be called anything other than honorable. Instead of prioritizing military readiness and the needs of our service members, MAGA Republicans are more concerned with stoking culture wars to appease their base, which will only make it more difficult to recruit service members from diverse backgrounds. In fact, I'm a member of the Armed Services Committee, and when we were discussing this in committee, I put into the record a report from the Gold Star families who conducted a survey of our service members and their family, who expressed the very concerns around racial tolerance, discrimination, as a factor of whether or not people wanted to join the military. So if you're so concerned about recruitment, you might actually want to focus on eliminating the issues of hate, discrimination, and white supremacy in the military. So my message here tonight, along with my colleagues, is not only will the Congressional Black Caucus continue to call for Representative Crane to make a formal apology to this body, as well as to the service members that were disrespected, but we also want to state in no uncertain terms that his views on diversity in the military are misguided. Representative Crane, Representative Gates, Senator Tuberville, we're not going back. We're not going back to the days of the 1950s. We're not going back to when our communities were segregated. We're not going back to when the term colored people was normalized. We're not going back here on the House floor, and we're not going back in America. And we will not be silenced. Our military is stronger when it reflects the entire American experience. Now, it's unfortunate, and in fact, it pains me that this must be said in 2023. But diversity is our nation's strength, not its burden. And instead of using it as a culture war issue, a wedge issue, I hope that the Speaker of this body will condemn the remarks of Representatives Crane and anyone else who would try to bring that type of divisive language to this body. I want to commend my colleagues for being here tonight. I know that this is an issue that strikes to the core of who we are and who we represent. We understand that when we lift up the black community, we lift up everybody. The Congressional Black Caucus may stand for the 80 million people across the country, but we stand for all Americans. And yes, we stand for our service members in the military. May God bless them, and may God bless the United States of America. I yield back.
I thank the Honorable Chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus, Congressman Stephen Horsford from the great state of Nevada. It is now my privilege to yield to the Honorable Congresswoman Joyce Beatty from the great state of Ohio.
Mr. Chairman, first let me say thank you to the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, Congressman Stephen Horsford, for shaping our message tonight and reminding us so eloquently of what our role is to be here as a member of Congress, as a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, representing the some 80 million Americans and some 18 million Black Americans. To our special order hour chairs, the gentleman from Illinois and the gentlewoman from Florida, thank you for your leadership role. Thank you for your opening remarks, reminding us that words matter, reminding us that as leaders, those elected to represent diverse bodies across this wonderful America that we live in. Thank you to my classmate, Congressman Donald Payne, for giving us a history, for setting the record straight. Mr. Speaker, we are here today because we want America to know how important our work is. We want them to know when we say we are woke, we are proud. We are speaking to constituents across America. For somehow my colleagues have started with that, turning that into a negative. Well, we are very clear that we are very woke. We are woke about what's needed to all constituents, and we are fighting for everyone. But yes, we clearly stand up and represent Black America. So I rise today to join my colleagues in shedding light on the deeply derogatory term that has perpetuated the pain and suffering endured by Black Americans throughout history. The term that was used by a member of this chamber just a few days ago, colored people. It was equally as disturbing, Mr. Chair, that he made reference to DE&I as lowering standards, getting less than. Well, today, I rise as a strong supporter of DE&I. Through the bold leadership of then Chairwoman Maxine Waters, chair of the prestigious Financial Services Committee, I was appointed by her as the first ever D&I chair of the Subcommittee of Diversity and Inclusion under the powerful Financial Services Committee. Now, I mention this for a reason, Mr. Chairman. We brought in the largest financial institutions in this nation, CEOs of companies like JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, and the list goes on and on. And each one of those CEOs under oath testified that they were committed to DE&I because it was a good business thing and it would make a difference in this country. And they hired DE&I corporate executives across America, not because it was lowering standards, not because they were employing people who were less than, but because they had an understanding in this America that we live in, that makes us more united, and it helps us avoid the culture wars that I am sadly seeing on this floor. And today, Mr. Speaker, I stand here as a Black woman, proud to serve all of my constituents. But today is very personal and somewhat emotional for me because I'm standing here in the same spot that I stood in last week, where I am now reminded that I was faced to deal with in 2023 what I heard on this floor. On this floor, Mr. Speaker, the People's House, I am forced to deal with what for centuries Black Americans have been subjected to: systemic oppression, denied human rights, and treated as lesser human beings simply because of the color of their skin. Phrases like this have no place on the House floor, in Congress, or anywhere else. This term, more commonly used in the Jim Crow years, a phrase that is deeply offensive and considered as a slur to delineate Black Americans as less than. And it carries the historical burden of pain and violent discrimination, widespread inequality, and segregation. So, Mr. Speaker, as I come to a close, let me just share with you that we live in a world where in the United States of America, it's the superpower on the global stage because of our rich diversity, and something that is to be celebrated, not used as a tool to shame not only us, but those servicemen who signed up to put their life on the line for this country. You know, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, what would John Lewis say? Because so many of my Republican colleagues proudly quote him, see something, say something. I'm feeling like what Shirley Chisholm must have thought when she was the only female to be one of the founders of the Congressional Black Caucus, and to stand on this House floor as a Black woman, having to deal with the things that we are having to deal with now. And certainly I could go on and do a roll call of many other Black Americans, white Americans, and brown Americans who have stood on this floor defending this House. This word should not be allowed to be used as a tool to shame or admonish those who are systemically marginalized or oppressed. I know well what the consequences that have come as a result of systemic discrimination, whether by policy or by everyday hate speech. Each of us, Mr. Speaker, in this body is responsible for challenging and dismantling systems of discrimination that have perpetuated throughout our society. So I'm going to offer a resolve. We've heard our chairperson say, no apologies. Seen a few statements on social media, but since the Speaker of the House issued a statement that there was no place for this, the leader of the House supported that the words be taken down. There is an issue that can help me with resolve. You see, several of us as Democrats and members of the Congressional Black Caucus, we have a piece of legislation that says Black history is American history. If we really believe in bipartisanship, if Representative Crane, as he said, wanted to amend his words because he did not mean that, and somewhere on social media he evoked God and that this was causing him with his team, then let's have all of our members recognize that there are so many things that Black Americans did because Black history is American history. If we had the time, I could rattle off a list of things that we are allowed to do because a Black person invented it. A Black person designed it. So if we really meant to say people of color, then let me say people of color have led and continue to lead this nation. A Black man served as president of these United States. A Black woman serves as vice president of these United States. And right here in the spot that you are standing, Mr. Speaker, a Black man for the first time in the history of this country became sworn in by this body as the leader in this House and held that most sacred gavel to put in the hands of the Speaker. So as I end, I will use my voice and my platform to make the world a better place for my children, for all of the children, grandchildren, and my grandchildren, so Spencer and Leah will know that they too will be valued as strong Black Americans. And I charge all of my colleagues to do the same. And to our chairs, I yield back.
I thank the Honorable Congresswoman Joyce Beatty for her remarks. It is now my privilege to yield to the Honorable Congresswoman Robin Kelly from the great state of Illinois.
Thank you so much to my colleague from Illinois and my colleague from Florida. Mr. Speaker, for centuries, Black Americans have been denied the right to define our own existence. How we live, how we work, and how we raise our children have been judged, appraised, scorned, and dismissed. To this day, we must fight back against harmful stereotypes and brutal discrimination. There are forces that seek to maintain the status quo that discriminates against Black Americans. And these forces don't just wear white hoods. Racism can be subtle. It persists because too many people fail to notice or don't want to notice how bias and discrimination infect the systems in which we live our lives. They claim colorblindness and deride wokeness, when in actuality, they fail to look out and see the world around them for what it is. This is the failure that leads a member of Congress to utter such an offensive phrase on the floor of this body, to insult me and my colleagues on the floor of this sacred chamber. This is why we refuse to back down when Republicans propose cutting programs that promote diversity and educate us on our history. Because it's not just about history. Black women are 3 times more likely to die in childbirth. Black Americans are more likely to be victims of gun violence. Black Americans are more likely to be denied the right to vote. Black Americans are likely to be saddled with crushing student debt. We face these disparities because of systems that were built to exclude us. When Republicans oppose diversity and inclusion, they are not just denying our history. They seek to resurrect the worst impulses of our history. We cannot and we will not let them. Nothing less than the fate of our democracy is on the line. I yield back.
I thank the Honorable Congresswoman Robin Kelly from Illinois for her remarks. It is now my privilege to yield to the Honorable Congresswoman Sheila Sherfless McCormick from the great state of Florida.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank my co-anchor, Representative Jonathan Jackson from the great state of Illinois. Last week, a colleague of mine on the other side of the aisle referred to Black service members as colored people on the very floor we stand on today. I, like many of my esteemed Congressional Black Caucus colleagues, could not believe what I was hearing. As a person of color, it was jarring. Not only was the congressman's comment beneath the office he was elected to serve, but it was a stinging reminder that racism is very much alive in today's day and age. We see it everywhere, from the highways we drive on to the neighborhoods plagued with disinvestment, and as we have learned, we can see it even here on the congressional floor and in the halls of Congress. Despite the progress we've made as a nation, a dark cloud of racism looms directly over our heads, and we hear about it and see it every single day. Unfortunately, Congressman Crane is not alone. Republican Senator Tuberville has struggled to denounce white nationalism. Let me be clear, the term colored people is a racist and antiquated term and is simply beyond the pale. In no place should it be used to be tolerated, and certainly not on the floor of the United States House of Representatives. It was Maya Angelou who once said, "When people show us who they are, believe them the first time." Last week, Congressman Crane showed the Republican Party's true colors and their agenda. It is plain as day to see that their roots and what they're trying to push us back to is in a day and age where racism and white supremacy actually led the way. Their attacks on DEI is astonishing and is an attempt to roll us back into the days, that the dark and gloomy days of the United States when we did not embrace and see each other as equals. As we stand here today, not only should these words be stricken, but every member of this body should stand in alliance with the Congressional Black Caucus to denounce these terms and to never and vow to never return back to the day and age where we saw black people as less than or colored people as less than. I yield back to my co-anchor.
I'd like to thank the Honorable Sheila Sherfullis McCormick for her remarks from the great state of Florida. It is now my privilege to yield to the Honorable Sheila Jackson Lee from the great state of Texas.
I thank the gentleman very much. I thank both the gentleman from Illinois and the gentlelady from Florida for their consistent and determined presence to bring to the American people truth and, of course, inspiration. Thank you both for your great leadership, and thank you to Chairman Horsford, Congressional Black Caucus. I think we are noted around the nation and around the world for this outstanding presentation every single week that enlightens people's minds and hearts, and they do it with great information. Let me take just a moment to honor the Reverend Dr. Jesse Jackson, who this past weekend had a stupendous effort, as he always does, with Operation Rainbow Push, for its outstanding national convention. The many people who have come over the years. This will not be a moment that I will take to completely pay tribute to Reverend Jackson, but I could not come to the floor without expressing my deep and abiding admiration for him. I've always said that Reverend Jackson, when no one else would be there to comfort those who are deprived, depressed, and simply outraged because of discrimination in this nation, it would be the Reverend Dr. Jesse Louis Jackson who would be present and would be in the most difficult of situations. And isn't it amazing, over 50 years, decades of consistently doing this, being the first African American to run for president. And frankly, I will say that I am in public service because of Reverend Jesse Louis Jackson. My first run was 1984, and I would not have won way down in Houston, Texas, had it not been for the unbelievable uprising, positive uprising of voters who were moved, energized, rushing to the polls, excited, and for those of us who happened to be on the ballot for the first time, a young African-American woman seeking to be a judge in the county of Harris. I could not have made those steps without the unbelievable leadership and the courage of not only Reverend Jackson, but his wife and his family, because they were doing it together. So let me, again, express my appreciation, and I know it was a stupendous conference, and I know that he has selected and given the anchor to a great leader, but it is a great leader who can make choices of greatness, and he has done so. I will just very quickly start on this gun violence prevention and public safety. Excuse my raspy voice, and I will not take long, but just to say, do we need to say it? Every day, 120 Americans are killed with guns. More than 32,000 people die from gun violence annually, including 2,677 children under 18 years of age. In our respective communities, we see toddlers being shot, 10-year-olds being shot, senior citizens being shot. And let me, in particular, give credit to Houston Police Department, as they have worked very hard to bring down homicides, investigate homicides, and the numbers have gone down. But it is very clear that they are desperately in need of federal action. They desperately need the universal background check, which we have not been able to do. They desperately need, in many instances, the ban on assault weapons. They desperately need the requirements of gun storage. My bill, H.R. 52, the Kimberly Vaughn Firearms Safe Storage Act, named in honor of Kimberly Vaughn, a student at Santa Fe High School who was just 17 years of age when a student entered her art class with a stolen gun and killed 10 people. Stolen from the home. These guns were laid out and were owned by a family member. Firearm injury is the leading cause of death, as I said, of children. Is it difficult to require the manufacturer to say store your gun and provide storage devices? Is it difficult for the retailer to provide storage devices? Is it difficult to be able to say as a nation we believe in the Second Amendment, but life is so much more important? And so when children as young as 9 and 10 are the victims of drive-by shootings intended for someone else, but it doesn't matter. I'm reminded of children from Chicago to Houston who have been shot innocently, or shot in the bed, or a woman who was shot in her house as the bullet whizzed close to her. And so I am rising today to say that not only must we stop the gun violence, but we must also draw, as the Congressional Black Caucus has done, to support funding for violence intervention, gun violence intervention. That is an important piece, and we must expand responsibility to ensure that we give tools to the community to stop violence. Workforce programs as well are very important. We must do it with our cities and do it with our law enforcement. Now is the time to stop gun violence in America and save lives. I yield back.
I would like to thank the Honorable Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee from the great state of Texas. I would like to yield my time to the Honorable Kamlager Dove, Congresswoman from the great state of California.
Thank you. I want to give thanks again to the gentleman from Illinois and the gentlewoman from Florida for holding this special order hour. And I just want to give my deep appreciation to the Congressional Black Caucus for always using this time for us to talk about timely and relevant issues. Last week, the gasp heard around the world came after a colleague from the other side of the aisle was talking about the National Defense Authorization Act, about the military, about veterans, and decided to call black people colored people, something you haven't heard in decades. I thought to myself, we are beyond this. Haven't we gotten beyond this? Well, I guess we have not. And the response was, the person misspoke. So I'm going to pause after saying that, because I still don't understand how that could be. It is not an ignorant slip of the tongue. You do not misspeak. If you're going to say that, that's because it's front of mind. It's because that's how you see black people. It's probably because that's what you've called black people. What's also interesting is that they are not here in the chamber to hear this, to reflect on that kind of ignorance. I know we are in a period of time where we want to be aggressive, hyper-aggressive. We want to push the envelope. We want to stoke fires. But I'm here to tell you that we are not going to take the bait. Black people are not going to be used as bait in these culture wars. And we're also not going to stand by and let you demoralize us, dehumanize us. What is important to note is that the majority of the people who are in these chambers every single day, helping us do this work, keeping us safe, running this floor, are black. How shameful is it? While they are making sure that we are doing the people's business, to then be called that. who could be our grandmothers, our parents, who fought in the civil rights movement to make sure that democracy was here in these chambers for all of us. It is fear and cowardice and ignorance that would allow those words to come out of your mouth. It is important that you know Black people are not going anywhere. We are here. We are in these chambers. We are in these committees. We are in your districts. We are your constituents. And show some respect. Show some respect. In my community, people like to say, you need to put some respect on my name. And I didn't think that we were going to have to say that in these chambers. But I see we do. So, this is why we should not be banning books. This is why reading is so fundamental. This is why history is important. Because if we remove ourselves far enough from it, we start to make the same mistakes over again. And no one wants that to happen. We are celebrating this year the March on Washington. We are fighting against forces that want to keep us from voting, that want to take away our votes, our voice, our children, our presence, our futures. That's a lot. So on top of that, don't be disrespectful and call us out of our name. Colored is for crayons, not to name a person, not to name a race. Let's not get it twisted. And with that, I yield back.
I thank the Honorable Congresswoman Sidney Kamlager-Dove from the great state of California. I would like to take a point of privilege and speak to the record. Mr. Speaker, may I make an inquiry about the time remaining?
The gentleman has consumed 47 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today with a heart burdened by the weight of history and a spirit ignited by the promise of the future. We gather here in these hallowed halls of power where words bear the weight of action and action shapes the destiny of our nation. But the words uttered by our fellow congressman, and I've waited for a sufficient response for him to apologize to the Honorable Congresswoman Joyce Beatty and to other members that seek truth and justice. But he has remained silent and he says he has misspoken. Misspoken means to also not have been made clear. So if he could clarify his remarks on who is a colored person, as the grandson of two soldiers that fought in U.S. wars, I would like to know what he was speaking about for colored. When my grandparents could not go on the first-class car after returning from Europe at the Union Station and had to go sit in the second-class car for colored people behind Nazi POWs that were allowed to go in the first-class car. We are trying to overcome a horrid racial past. Mr. Crane, I would like to take this opportunity to share with you a little history. When we hear as African Americans, as our brothers and sisters referred to as colored people in the year of 2023, it doesn't just make us uncomfortable, it transports us back through centuries of struggle, resilience, and a pursuit of justice often denied. I stand here before you today, not just as a member of Congress, but a freedom fighter. Our fight as Americans started before the country was even born. It's been over 400 years when the first persons that were imported from Africa had been enslaved. Nearly 2 centuries after, in 1787, our nation held a constitutional convention, Mr. Crane. It was there that the infamous 3/5 compromise was struck. 3 out of 5 Americans that had been enslaved were counted as representations for taxation, not for votes. The humanity of a person was whittled down to a fraction. Can you imagine the audacity, the horror? Just 2 years later, the Honorable Congressman, later in 1789, we stand witness to a profound paradox that happened. The same 1789 that gave birth to this illustrious institution, the United States House of Representatives, founded in 1789. On the one hand, we celebrate the inauguration of our first president, President George Washington. His picture stands proudly in this chamber, a milestone in our nation's narrative. Yet, let us not overlook the uncomfortable truth that this esteemed leader was himself a holder of Americans enslaved. A chilling reminder that our nation's foundation was laid with the sweat and blood of those in chains. In the years that followed, from 1740 to 1834, Southern slave states employed another insidious tool to maintain oppressive status quo, the anti-literacy laws. I have not been able to find any other nation that had enacted anti-literacy laws. Imagine a system so threatened by the enlightenment of its subjugated people that they made it illegal for the enslaved and free people of color to learn to read and write. In 1850, Mr. Crane, the Fugitive Slave Act was enacted, transforming ordinary citizens into accomplices for the slavery system. A free territory was no longer a sanctuary. It could transform into a hunting ground for those seeking freedom. And aiding the enslaved, a profound act of humanity, was suddenly a criminal act, punishable by fine and imprisonment. This act didn't target the enslaved, it cast its nefarious shadow over the entire nation, implicating all in the perpetration of this abhorrent institution. In the wake of this act, Mr. Crane, 7 years later in 1857, the Supreme Court reached a decision in the Dred Scott case that shook the very foundation of freedom and human dignity. The court ruled that all black people, regardless of their status as free or enslaved, were not and could never become citizens of the United States. This wasn't just a judicial ruling, it was a heart-rending affirmation of the racial prejudice deeply rooted in our society, a prejudice that permeated even our nation's highest courts. In the year 1863, we saw a light, the Emancipation Proclamation. Freedom, after 246 years, freedom, it seemed, was finally within our grasp. A bloody civil war fought over the right to keep human beings in bondage ended 2 years later, our nation's deadliest war, and we dared to dream of a new dawn for our people. Yet, as the sun of liberation rose, the shadows of oppression heightened. In a bitter twist of irony, freedom unveiled a new face of subjugation. The Black Codes of 1865 were enacted. Though the iron chains of slavery had been shattered, this new set of manacles were fastened around us, chains woven with legal threads and tightened by the grips of racial bias. They were not as visible as the shackles of old, but they were no less oppressive, no less real. A century later, in 1963, at the foot of the Lincoln Memorial, the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. gave voice to the bitter truth, and I quote, 100 years later, the colored American is still not free, close quote. 100 years after emancipation, the struggle was far from over. We had been unshackled, yet we remained bound by the chains of systemic discrimination, segregation, and marginalization. The term Jim Crow law surfaced in 1892. Just 4 years later, there was Plessy versus Ferguson. The verdict cemented the doctrine of separate but equal, which inherently meant being unequal. Despite these oppressive circumstances, our ancestors fought with courage and determination, Congressman Crane. They fought for the Civil Rights Act in 1866 and fought in 1964, 65, and 1966. Our ancestors fought for the 13th Amendment to abolish slavery. Our ancestors fought for the 14th Amendment to have equal protection under the law and guaranteeing citizenship. They fought for the 15th Amendment so that we could have the right to vote for African American men. These victories did not come easy. They were fought with blood, sweat, and tears of our forebears. Today we find ourselves in 2023, but the echoes of our past are loud. Our colleague, Mr. Crane, has evoked the ghost of a very painful past by addressing us in this chamber as colored people. We've served in every war, Mr. Crane, a term as archaic as the prejudices it represents. In doing so, he blurs the line between past and present, reminding us of an era we've struggled to move beyond. His words are not just a singular lapse in judgment, but a symptom of a much larger disease, a disease that seeped into the highest courts of our land, where the 14th Amendment, the very symbol of our freedom, has been twisted into a weapon against affirmative action. This very amendment, a cornerstone of liberty and equality, has been misused to dismantle a policy intended to level a playing field that has been historically skewed against African Americans. Our attention is then drawn to the targets of this regressive decision. Think about it. Harvard University, founded in 1636. The University of North Carolina, founded in 1789. The Supreme Court in 2023 cited the 14th Amendment, ratified in 1868 in the name of Make America Great Again. Now we have our colleague, Mr. Crane, using the words colored, the words that my mother and father had to see growing up in South Carolina and Florida and Virginia for colored water fountains, colored schools. Can we please move forward? Can we please demand an apology to this great body of distinguished men and women from Mr. Crane? So I ask, is it truly a coincidence that these specific institutions have been targeted for the battleground for the dismantling of affirmative action? Or is it an insidious reminder of our painful history, a pointed jab at the very heart for our struggle for equality and access and opportunity? We have been the African American community has been in bondage longer than we've ever been free. Our exclusion has lasted longer than our inclusion. Even half a century after the Civil Rights Act of 1965, we ask ourselves, are we truly free to meritocratically grow? This timeline, this history, is a testament to our resilience. It is a reminder of our past, a measure of our progress, and a marker of the journey ahead. We stand on the shoulders of those who have come before us, those who fought, those who've struggled, and those who have sacrificed. We owe it to them and to ourselves to keep the flame of justice burning bright. This journey has been long and it is not over, but we will not falter, we will not tire, we will not rest until we can unequivocally say that we are free, until justice is not just a word in our Pledge of Allegiance, but a reality in our lives. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make an inquiry of time.
The gentleman has consumed 58 minutes and 47 seconds.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to yield the controlling balance of my time How do I close out? There you go. I would like to make a motion, Mr. Speaker, to adjourn the House.
The question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. Accordingly, the House stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow for morning hour debate.